afternoon, good evening. It is just absolutely remarkable to be here with everybody. Good to see you. We're going to begin to settle in. We've got some folks coming, so we'll give it just a second, but we also want to honor time. And in this beginning of this inaugural first session of Indeed and Truth, you've come together in this space with a knowing, a wonder, a sense of awe and curiosity. And so I am delighted that you are taking this journey with us and allowing us to take this journey with you. We're going to let a few more folks come in. And so just kind of settle in as we're waiting for everyone to get in the room, to be in the room. I want to ask you if you will change, do an addition on your name. What we're asking is if you will do the first three initials of your church. We're going to do some breakout groups and then have your first name. So we'll take a second to have you do that change. If anyone needs to know how to change their name, I'm happy to walk you through it.
Yes, that would be helpful.
All right. So if you take your mouse and scroll over the screen where your picture is, 3 dots should show up. If you click on those 3 dots, there's going to be a menu that you get. And about 2/3 of the way down, you're going to see rename. If you click on rename, it will let you change your name, change what the tagline on the bottom.
And tell us again the instructions for how you want our name to be.
The 3 initials, first or initials of your church, and then your first name.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. So like WBC Shelby. That works. Becky's got St. Charles Avenue Baptist, so we know. There are going to be a couple of times this evening where we're going to breakout groups. Some will be one with your team from your church, and some will be with this broader cohort team, cross engaged. Wonderful. One other piece of guidance, you may want to shift from time to time to speaker view. So if you're only getting me as I talk and you don't see this full gallery of everybody, let's just take a moment and have you see the full gallery of this cohort. And to do that, oh, I'm forgetting where to do that. Shauna.
Oh, in the top
under
left, Shauna,
Yep.
in your top right-hand corner, you should see the word view, and what they call sometimes the waffle, the 9 squares together, 3 rows of 3. So if you click on that, you'll see some options for view. So if you'd like to see everyone, gallery will pull you in. Later on, we'll be doing some introductions, and once you speak, when you're each speaking for yourselves, we'll have you shift to speaker view, because that means it will easily jump to the person who's speaking so you can see who they are without having to search around on your screen.
And then again, for a couple of folks that are coming in the room, we're so glad you were here. We know traffic can be a challenge. Parking can be a challenge. We are asking that you change your name so you have the first 3 initials of the initials of the congregation you're with, and then your first name or your full name, however that works. So when we do breakouts by team, it makes it a little easier for us to manually do that. One of my favorite resources is the Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo. He's a poet. He's a cancer survivor. He's a spiritualist. And on today's reading, it starts with, we are born with this need to cry our naked cry inside each other. And that felt very poignant in terms of our coming together here. Cries of joy, cries of lament, together with each other. One of the faith practices I engage in, we greet with namaste or namaskar, the Aramaic. I behold the spirit, the God in you. The spirit in me sees you. And so as we come in the space on this journey, I feel that. I feel each of you. I've had this beautiful opportunity to be in space with you already some, but not like this. So just take a moment in gallery view and look at all the faces that are new to you and familiar. A reunion, a memory of a vision to be created. We're going to spend this session together, getting to know one another, getting to understand what this journey will carry you through, what lifting and building you will get to do. There will be breakout groups. You won't have to do anything except click join. We're going to set it all up for you. We will, as with each of our sessions, have a break at about the 1 hour mark, because sitting on Zoom for a while, being still, can be a little much. So there'll be the space to get up and move. So we will walk through that. But as we get started, let's just take a moment to really ground in. So I like to say, feel the seat that holds you. Feel your feet on the ground as the earth pulls you in and spirit pulls you up and out. And if you're comfortable with it, close your eyes for just a moment and take a deep breath in and release. And another breath in and exhale. And a third inhale, sending that message to your brain that you are in a safe place. The oxygen flowing into the bloodstream. And exhale that which you don't need for this moment. And feel the sensations of being here. Feel the inhale and the exhale that is the natural cadence of your breath. Bring some awareness to the moments between the inhale and the exhale. There are spiritual practices that say that there is God in those spaces. We know that God is in the inhale, the exhale, and the space in between. We feel the work of spirit already. So I lift up and say, Father, Mother, God, we thank you for this moment. We thank you for this brick in a road, this hammer against a wall, the divine gifts that are embraced by each individual and all who come with us. For our knowing that healing and love is your way. We thank you for the grace and the stamina to look back so that we build forward. That we breathe together. That we hold one another. That we share and we laugh and celebrate the world that you have created and the way that we flow in and through it. Thank you for the gifts of those who had the insight to say yes. Not just here, but in the worlds they have had coming here. The learnings together. The freeing of love. The freeing of self. And so it is. Amen. So, here we are. Again, I think all of you have met me at one time or another. My name is Caroline Durham, and I am the Executive Director for the St. Charles Center for Faith Plus Action. And we have partnered with this other remarkable organization called E Pluribus Unum to put together Indeed and Truth. And so as we start tonight, I would love for you all to meet. I'm doing this a little out of order, and I know that. To meet some of the team members who are here. I will start with my partner in planning and creation. We've met weekly for several months now. Shauna Lewis, who is with EPU. Shauna, do you want to say a bit about yourself? Introduce yourself.
I'm happy to. Hello, everyone. I'm Shauna Lewis. I work with E Pluribus Unum. We are a race and equity organization based in New Orleans with a small office in Washington, D.C. Our work focuses on the 13 southern states and working with community-based organizations, academic institutions, faith institutions that are focused on how to bring more equity into their work and how to navigate some of the challenges that come up, particularly when they might be dealing with their own history. We're really very excited to be with you all tonight. This program has been a long time in the making. We've listened to a lot of faith leaders, to a lot of congregants, to a lot of churches trying to do this work as we've developed the programming. We've worked in tandem with them. So I just want to thank you for participating, for trusting us with this, and to let you know we take it very seriously. At all stages, we welcome your feedback, and we really want this to be something that's meaningful to you and that's useful to you in your work. So thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you. And we have two of our faculty leads with us tonight. Reverend Dr. Joey Shelton is here. Joey, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Joey Shelton. I live in North Carolina in town of Clayton, just south of Raleigh. Moved here recently because my wife became the bishop of the North Carolina United Methodist Conference. So I left my faculty and staff position at Millsaps College to come here. I'm an elder in the United Methodist Church. I'm retired now, but I am serving very part-time at a local church here in Clayton. I practiced law for 10 years. I have spent 2 stints in higher education in teaching and leading, one at Duke Divinity School, the other at Millsaps College, and 17 years in congregations that were located in areas that invited diversity and inclusion. And so this has been a passion of mine from the very beginning of my divinity school experience. So it's a real pleasure to be with all of you, and I look forward to working with you in this great journey that we're on.
Thank you. And then the other faculty lead curriculum design team member is Reverend Dr. Jay Augustine, who is also with us this evening.
Hello, what a pleasure to be with you. I see at least one familiar face. I'm thankful for the leadership. I'm thankful for my colleague, Joey. I will follow his lead by introducing myself and saying, just like him, he's my twin brother. Did you catch that? He's my twin brother. I am also a recovering lawyer, right? So I am a native of New Orleans. I too practiced law for about 10 years before accepting the calling to ordained ministry. That meant seminary, that meant follow-on doctoral work. I'm currently pastoring in Durham, North Carolina. I also teach on the faculty, a consulting faculty member at Duke Divinity School. I've taught at a few different law schools. It is an honor to be in this space with you. I came tonight just really to say hello because my colleagues know from our planning sessions, August 6th is a holiday in my household because this is my daughter's birthday. So I'm here for a minute. Yes, this is my baby girl's birthday. So I am here for a minute. That's how much you mean to me. That's exactly how much you mean to me. But it's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to working with you all in the future, though. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and happy birthday to your daughter. I know your legacy is strong, Jay. I know your legacy is strong already. So thank you for that. As we look toward the next year and a half, which feels like a long time, and yet it's going to go by fast. I want to touch base a little bit on what we've got in store for you. And so a component of what will happen in these monthly sessions is there will be a learning. There will be beautiful teachings by Jay and Joey and by other theologians and historians that are going to take you through historical theology, the relationship of church history to national and local history, the challenge and the powers of the way Christianity is used in terms of racial history, how it's been used, how it's currently being used. And so each session, there will be a faculty member, or there will also be spaces where you all will have an opportunity to do some working, some strategizing, some engaging and learning from one another as you build out and do the work that is happening in your congregation and in your community. You will learn about church history and how to dive into the archives within your church. You will learn about how to examine and study the local history and national history. Now, I know that there's a way that you think, my goodness, how are churches? And we're going to have you introduce yourselves as a church in just a minute. Our churches, many of you have more than 100 years of history. And so how are we going to do that in 18 months? That's not the expectation. You'll get to dial in on an event time, focusing on some racial history event of the US or of your local community. There are going to be archivists who are going to come and teach you how to do the work with primary documents, finding what you want to find, looking at sources that maybe we're not used to looking at, right? Looking at not necessarily mainstream, but there are pieces and publications and resources that are right there at your fingertips. And I will share with you, as you will learn through time, that some of you right here in this room are historians by trade, by hobby, by interest. And so that's going to come about. There are going to be sessions for reflection and discernment to talk about and process what you're going through. And to ask questions of one another, to share experiences, to cross-pollinate. There will be sessions where there are churches that have gone through what you're going through, are going to come talk about how they did what they did, where it worked, where it didn't work. The faculty that we have coming in addition to Joey and Jay, include individuals who have done work specifically around this. The word civil engagement comes, and that's coming from an earlier meeting I had today, who've done research and around race and Christian nationalism, around the issues of moderate and well-intentioned congregations committing to action and the action never happens. How do we deal with that? Who has studied how that has happened across the South, so that you're learning from people who have looked at the lay of the land, what to do with fertile earth, how to pull the weeds, how to know when a weed is in fact a flower, in terms of what you're finding and how you move forward. You all each bring a different aspect, not just from a geographical standpoint, but from Christianity. What we know is there are all different religions that have come about. So too will the faculty reflect that. How do you deal with text in its fullness, rather than leaving out, or maybe perhaps even missing full text that teach us what the way shower Jesus has given us in terms of reconciliation, in terms of love, in terms of healing and not harming? Where have we been taught in ways that we didn't realize we were being taught, that we want to learn differently? There's going to be the space for that learning. There's going to be the space for the questioning, for the discussion, for the masterminding, so that your congregation and your community strengthens and thrives even more. That the future that you have created is one that your heart knows, that sometimes the world around us doesn't actually engage in. So with that, there are a couple of pieces. There are some sessions that we're going to ask for your full teams to be at, and I'll send this to you in writing. November 2024, Courageous Conversations is going to do a workshop with you all on navigating challenging conversations about race and equity. In February 2025, the People's Institute for Undoing Racism will do a national history component, national racial history. We're asked for that. In June 2025, there'll be a month for you all to actually dive in with your congregations. It's Juneteenth, and we'll talk about the significance of Juneteenth. The fact that while we're still looking for freedom today, there were enslaved people in Texas and beyond, thousands, who were not told when the Emancipation Proclamation came into being that they were in fact free from slavery until Juneteenth. June 19th, and we'll talk more about that. And then in November or early December of 2025, you'll all come together in New Orleans and build out and share out and compile what you've done, and continue to do some workshopping and some forward strategizing. Because again, 18 months can't get you there, and this work is never ending. And so we will share those dates out with you as they come about, so you can let your people know. I'd love to take a moment and just have me pause and let each of the churches be introduced. And here's what I'd love to do. I've got one of the point people that I have for the church, and I'd love to have you just very briefly introduce your church name, how old it is, denomination, location, and maybe just a little bit about your team's why, and then we'll dive more into that in breakout groups. And I'd love to start with the First Christian Church of Montgomery, Alabama. Reverend Shane, I think, is in here. Is Reverend Shane here? I'm looking. Maybe
Yeah, I'm
not.
here.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Sorry,
Thank
I
you.
was just emailing one of my team members who said, send me the link, will you? And I was just hitting send on that. So hi, I am Reverend Shane Eisner. I'm the pastor at First Christian Church Disciples of Christ in Montgomery, Alabama, which is way too long of a church name, but it is what it is. As I recall, Carolyn, you wanted me to say sort of the why we are here.
Yeah, just a brief why.
Sure. Our church is about 108 years old. I have not been there the entire time. We're located in the eastern suburbs of Montgomery, or at least what used to be the eastern suburbs of Montgomery as it's moved east. We began in the downtown area of Montgomery, and in 1988, 89, we moved out to the east, as I have heard about it, quote, where the people were going, which is to say we're a white flight congregation in the suburbs who since that time has become rather progressive in various aspects of our church identity. But I'm not sure we've sort of thought fully through about what it means to be an intentionally sort of more a white flight church in the suburbs who's intentionally acknowledged that part of our history and who's articulated how that uniqueness can bless our suburb in terms of helping it do what it does better. So we're trying to think through that thought more fully and let it guide our mission more clearly. And they're really cool people, and the fact I get to be their pastor is a gift and a blessing almost every Sunday.
Thank you. Abby, do you mind sharing about Wilshire Baptist?
Sorry about that. I could not get it to unmute. I'd be happy to. I am with Wilshire Baptist. We are in Dallas, Texas. We're in the city, just a little bit north of downtown. Wilshire was founded in 1951, so not quite at our 100 mark. We are largely a white, affluent, highly educated professional church with a real desire and commitment to be missional and justice oriented. And kind of I think a lot of us on our cohort sit in that tension of how do we live that authentically as a white affluent church in the city, and how can we be sure that our work isn't just surface. We did some good work during the slowdown during the pandemic, and then our racial justice efforts have kind of honestly stalled out a little bit, I think. And so I think this cohort is really eager to really reinvest in that work and dig deeper. We are blessed with a really robust archive at the church, and so I'm eager to get in there and see what we can find. So I think that's who we are.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Kathy, with Pullen Memorial Baptist, could you share a little bit about Pullen?
I can hear you, you can't hear.
We hear you.
You went back on mute accidentally. We heard you, but I think you accidentally hit it again.
I think I saw Kathy mouthing, why don't we let Shalise do it? I'm Shalise, I'm the associate pastor at Pullen Memorial Baptist Church. We have been around for about 140 years on the edge in Raleigh, North Carolina, on the edge of NC State, about a mile from our state government downtown, and we have been engaged intentionally in a coordinated way in some anti-racism efforts over the past, I would say like 3 or 4 years. And part of what has been important has been kind of investigating our own the ways in which we've been complicit and maybe kind of still are. So investigating kind of our own systems. And so this seemed like a good opportunity to continue that work and to expand it in our congregation.
Great, thank you so much. Tom, would you share a little bit about St. James?
Be glad to. I'm Tom Greener. I'm the lead pastor at St. James. We were founded in 1952, so pretty close to the same age as, was it First Christian? That was this 1951. We are in Greenville, North Carolina. We are just off the edge of East Carolina University. I suspect that that the move that created us was a part of the white flight, though I don't really know it. We are on Forest Hills Circle is one of the roads by us, and Forest Hills tended to be one of the early suburb names as people moved out from downtown areas. So I think that was probably a part of the community growing to create us. Our why, we've been doing some work on anti-racism and conversation with some of the other congregations in our area. Wanted to continue that. In addition, we have seen a growth in international students in our ministry, and that's brought a great deal of diversity, and we want to lean into that. And probably be good as a United Methodist if I look good in the bishop's household. So Joey's wife is my bishop. So
That's wonderful. Thank you. Mary with First Pres. Tell us a bit about your congregation.
We are not yet a member of this cohort, but my name is Mary Ellison. I'm an elder at First Presbyterian Church in Richmond, Virginia. We're not yet a member of the cohort, but our pastor, Amy Starr Redwine, who couldn't be with us tonight, asked if I would attend and find out what IDAT is about and what you all are doing. Our church was founded in 1812. So we're what, 212 years old. We've had a number of locations, first starting in the inner city, and over the years we moved out with white flight to a residential area of the city. We're within the city limits, but it's entirely residential. We are a white, I love the words that someone else used because they apply to us. We're a white, highly educated, affluent church. And our why includes the fact that Richmond was the largest slave market during that era, second maybe only to New Orleans. That is our history, and First Presbyterian Church helped and initiated cooperated at least in the raising of funds for the erection of the Confederate monuments in Richmond, which made national news when they were taken down. And many of us in our church feel that we have primary responsibility for leading our congregation in understanding the history of our church's role in racism and how we may act now to dismantle it. We have a large number of members who are committed progressives who are interested in this effort and who actively participate in a number of things in our city aimed at dismantling racism. But we also have a large number of members who I would not say are racist, but who are apathetic about racial issues. And I think in large measure because they don't understand how they are impacted by racism and how our legacy continues to contribute to it. So we've done a lot of work. A lot of us understand our history. the city's history. There's an awesome book called Richmond's Unhealed History, written by Ben Campbell, that talks about the origins of this, starting with Jamestown. It's a fascinating, and I think a lot of it applies to many cities in the South. So that's us. I'm here to listen.
We're glad to have you. Really glad to have you. Becky, St. Charles Avenue Baptist.
Hey, guys. St. Charles Avenue Baptist is a congregation that was founded in the 1890s in Uptown New Orleans. It was launched actually as a mission of Coliseum Park Baptist Church, which has a much longer history, but no longer is in existence. So I would say that we carry their heritage as well as our own. We are adjacent to the Loyola and Tulane campuses uptown and by Audubon Park, if you know where that is, and right on St. Charles Avenue. We are a progressive congregation that sees ourselves as very active in dealing with social justice issues. We love to talk about the stories of one of our pastors and one of our members who were very active in the civil rights movement, one of them sitting in at the Woolworth lunch counter and getting arrested for that. And so we see ourselves as very open and accepting as a congregation. I would say, as Mary said, that probably there are a number of us that have been directly involved in working on racial justice issues, but there are also folks in the congregation who get a little defensive and maybe don't want to dive too deeply into these issues. And I think many of us that are on this team see that as a spiritual issue, as well as an issue of doing justice in our world. And so we are here to learn from you all more about how to engage in a constructive and effective way in conversations with our own congregation around these issues, in hopes of bringing more light for ourselves, but also for others in our congregation to this issue, and how we can work more effectively for justice. I'll just add that we also in 2019 launched the St. Charles Center for Faith and Action as a missional legacy of the congregation to work at the intersection of faith and social justice, primarily on racial justice and criminal legal system issues. So we do work in those arenas, but we have a ways to go in understanding our own history and our own complicity at times in the ongoing story of racism and how it is perpetuating injustice in our own community.
Thank you. And now it's time for a little speed connecting. Shauna, are you introducing this or am I? You pointed at me?
I did point at you.
Okay, great. So our Zoom master Maya is putting together some random rooms, and you will be together in groups of about 3 or 4 for about 4 minutes, just to introduce yourselves individually. And then you're going to magically be put into another room. We're going to do 4 minutes of about 4 times so that you can get to know each other just as a start as we go on this path. So Zoom Master Maya, can you open the rooms?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
All right.
Welcome back. Glad to see you all. So you've had a chance to meet a few of your cohort members individually. And over the next couple sessions, we'll toss in another speed round or 2 so you all can continue meeting each other individually. We know in a group this size, it can be easy to feel like you're not getting to know each other, and we want as much as possible to give you that opportunity. But moving on for this kind of next part of the session, what we really wanted to focus on is thinking about what this journey actually looks like and thinking about practice. Our full approach to all of this, to this entire experience, is doing it in such a way that you can immediately put into practice whatever you're learning, and that we can think about and talk about how a lot of the things that we're learning from the guest speakers, learning from the experts that are going to speak to you, learning from those who have done it before, start to think immediately about what this looks like in each of your specific churches and each of your specific circumstances, so that it's useful right away. So we're not trying to plan a 4-year college degree where at the end of it, you finally start to see some benefit. We want you to start feeling benefit from day one, as soon as you walk out of this room. So what I'm going to do now to get us started on this segment is show a video about St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Richmond, Virginia. This is just one story. We've had the benefit and the blessing of working with them, getting to know them last year, and of working with them to help document the journey that they've been on. And thought it might be interesting for you all to kind of see a church who has spent many years, by the way. What you're about to see was many years in the making. So this is certainly not a standard we're trying to put pressure on anyone to feel like you're supposed to attain, but more just to understand that this is something that is possible. It takes hard work. It takes a lot of dedication. There are prices. It's not easy, and prices have been paid for the work that's been done, but it is not an impossible journey. And so many times this kind of work can feel impossible and feel like it's going nowhere. So, and before I start that, I did just want to lift up and recognize, I know many of you are on the East Coast. We know Hurricane Debbie is out there. I hope all of you and your own families are safe. We did have a church. We have a member church in South Carolina where we see there are no members here tonight. So we're just lifting them up as well and hoping that that is not the reason. But we just want to recognize that we know there are a lot of other things going on tonight. And if any of you or your loved ones are affected, please know that we take that to heart.
This is the church where Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis worshiped during the Civil War. In 2015, with the murder of the church members in Charleston at Mother Emanuel Church, shortly after, our rector, Wallace Adams Riley, gave a sermon, and he said, "We need to get real about this and look around St. Paul's and look at the plaques on the walls and ask yourselves, is this a welcoming place? Are we welcoming everyone?"
There were Confederate symbols, even in prayer books and hymnals, that had been dedicated to people from the past. And I was like, oh, it was truly eye-opening.
You know, this was our third trip to Richmond, and Richmond became very important to our work. It becomes important to the history of race in the South overall. It was the capital of the Confederacy, and ever since then, it has dealt with that history, dealt with that memory. And you know, no place better than St. Paul's Episcopal Church. Do you see how people of faith, people of goodwill work through that very difficult history and find the narrative that they've wanted to tell forever? You know, the lost cause really takes away a lot of that truth. And I think the thing that E Pluribus Unum and our team are going to walk away from, and something that we want to amplify for other people doing this work, is that the amount of effort for healing and finding the truth should equal the amount of energy that went into changing it in the first place.
At E Pluribus Unum, we think it's important to find those moments of quiet brilliance and identify organizations who are working on the ground, making it happen in communities, finding the truth, reconciling with the truth, and figuring out a way to move their community forward. whether it's faith-based organizations, community-based organizations, or individuals. We are here to amplify their stories with the hope to inspire others, and also redefining what success looks like, because success looks different from every community, and that's what we want to do on the engagement team, is find those people, bring those stories to light.
So the first time I was in the pulpit following the murders at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston in the summer of 2015, I preached a sermon then that brought out, here's one way to think of it, it brought out into the open for this people of St. Paul's things that I had been wrestling with since coming to St. Paul's. It was not only about St. Paul's and St. Paul's identity, but also about my own identity. I myself I'm descended directly from 11 Confederate soldiers. They were my great-great-grandfathers and my great-great-great-grandfathers. So I had grown up with an awareness of them and an honoring and celebrating of them that was really, honestly, woven just into the fabric of life in ways very much like that Confederate history of St. Paul's was woven into its life all those years. But when I got up into the pulpit that Sunday, what I did was say, in the aftermath of what's happened at Mother Emanuel, what might God be saying to us now? And so what I did was pose two possibilities. I said, maybe it's that God would have us get involved with advocating for responsible, sane, humane policy in the Commonwealth of Virginia around guns. Maybe that's what God would call us to do in the aftermath of this. I said another possibility would be, what if God asks us now to have a conversation about the history of our St. Paul's parish, the history of this church, of this congregation, for us to talk about what it means for an African American man, woman, or child to walk into our church and to see on the walls images of the Confederate flag. You know, does he or she feel as welcome as anyone else, as any white person walking in here? And I pointed to some examples around the room, mentioning the kneelers up at the altar rail with the images of the Confederate flag as examples, mentioning a window dedicated to Davis, window dedicated to Lee. So is it time for us, I asked the congregation, to have a more honest, a deeper, a more uncomfortable conversation than we've ever had before about the identity of this congregation of St. Paul's as a church so deeply associated with the Confederacy?
The goal was to help this particular church that had been known as the Cathedral of the Confederacy finally take some steps.
What do we do with some of the dedications of the stained glass windows? The windows that are now dedicated to St. Paul and Moses were dedicated to Robert E. Lee and Jeff Davis. But we had to do the inner work before you can really do the outer work.
It was enlightening for me. It was opened my eyes to things that I thought I knew, but didn't. Why would you have emblems in your church that can cause pain to people? We all need to tell the truth and then move forward with what we've learned.
I had conversations with people whose families' names are on these plaques, who've gone to this church for generation upon generation, some of whom are proud of their past and some of whom are not.
Before we can get into any real actions or reparations or any kind of sense of reconciliation, first confession has to happen. And there has to be confession from the perspective of what did the white people involved do.
I think we learned a lot, and I think there's been a lot of wisdom gained, and there's a lot to share to help inspire others to take the risk, to do the hard work of interrogating the past, to lead to more freedom, to really be able to do the work that I think the church is supposed to do, which is to restore people to unity with God and each other through Jesus Christ.
I want St. Paul's to be a model of what it looks like to look at our history and to say that change is possible. That's brave work. Those are brave conversations. And not every church is ready to do that. But when a church is ready to do that, when a church leader is ready to do that, I want them to be able to turn to us and to say, how did that go? What was it like? Where did you screw up? Where did you knock it out of the park? What would you do differently?
When you visit St. Paul's today, you will not see a plaque where Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee sat. This is a shrine to the glory of God and to our Lord Jesus Christ, and that's who we're about. And so, yes, there's the shame and the pain of that past, but it's up to us. It's our responsibility to know that history, but also to know the legacy, to know about systemic racism, to know about redlining, to know about inequality of the wealth gap, to know about the inequality of the school systems and why that exists today, to know that we need to listen to the Black community, to the minority community beyond the Black community of people of color, to people of all socioeconomic levels who are in need in this community, to listen, to know how to help instead of to assume and to impose a way of helping. By knowing our history, we can better engage the present and to know how to go forward in the future and to find partnerships and to stay engaged and to continue to listen.
E pluribus unum.
Out of many, one.
Out of many, one.
Out of many, one. This is the church where Robert E. Lee and Jeff.
There we go. Let me see if I can get us down to the next. There we go. So you all should be seeing a slide that says the congregational journey. Is that what everyone's seeing? Okay. Before we get to that, I just want to give a moment. Say, does anyone have any thoughts or just any reaction or anything around what we just saw about St. Paul's journey? You don't have to, but I just wanted to give space in case anybody wanted to make any comment or had any thoughts. And you're on mute, Mary. You can put please.
Is that video available?
We can share that. So we'll be creating, and we'll talk to this more about you all, but we'll be creating a cohort space for all the materials that are in the sessions. And so we can put that out there. We haven't, actually, this one might actually be publicly too. I'll double check. I think we might have actually already sent it out so it can go out publicly. But for now, it will certainly be available to the cohort, and I will confirm whether or not I have permission to tell you all to spread it far and wide if you want to share with broader congregation. We know that St. Paul's is a little bit more of an extreme example in terms of the level of connection and memorabilia and that type of thing that was reflecting the Confederacy. But we feel that as an example of being able to show if it can happen in a church that had so much physical representation even. The plaques, you saw Bethel O'Leary talk about the plaques that used to mark the pews for Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis were removed during the pandemic sometime. So in the 2020s, just a few years ago. So when you think about those just being removed and thinking about how long many of that has been up, they talked about how there were people that came from far and wide to the church, not to worship, but just to see a lot of this memorabilia as though it were a museum. And so if you just think about the challenge and that it can take for a place of that, that's that entrenched, then hopefully that just makes it seem more possible if your church might not have quite that level. And so that's the idea. It's just to kind of show a journey, and and to show that this work is possible, because so much of it you don't see in the immediate. This is not the type of work that has the instant gratification. And so we just wanted to kind of start that out. You'll be hearing much more about St. Paul's and other churches that we've had a chance to hear from. Yes, Tom, please.
I think that the flip side of the power of the video in terms of their ability to address their own history is it was also so very visible. It was so, they had to know it was there. And in a church the age of St. James, we don't have the memory of the Confederacy. We're dealing with maybe some issues around school integration and some of those things, which are no less painful. But it's going to take more detective work for us.
And that's a very fair point. And I think, and that's a big piece of what we're going to be looking at. Like, what does this look like? And you're right, there were some very visible things related to the Confederacy, but in between the time of the end of the Civil War to now, many more things occurred, and St. Paul's has history related to all of that might not be on the walls, but in the process that was started by addressing the more physical things, they had to kind of come to terms with and dig deeper with the other. And so I think that's an excellent point. I think that's the point that's true for all of us. And that'll be part of the things that we're bringing in, looking at how do you find these records? All churches are very different with what type of records were kept, whether a hurricane came 70 years ago and swept it all away, or a building burnt down and you don't have any of it anymore, or whether you have every scrap of paper that was ever written or typed on in the building. And so just thinking about all of the different places and all the different sources of information that will look very different for each community, but how it can all be useful and how we can figure out how to go about identifying what are the resources available for each of us specifically, and how can they benefit this process and what you're looking for out of it. Any other thoughts as we move forward? So that was just a little bit of inspiration to get us started. But another thing really want to pull out of that, and that we really want to focus on tonight in terms of you all having a concrete takeaway to move forward with your congregations, is that this has to be a congregational journey. And so what's really important to think about is ultimately, if we think about what success might look like, and we've had each of you all start to think about that individually for your own institutions, but the kind of utopia would be if we get to the point where you don't need a department or a committee or a special team to think about race and equity, right? Because it's just so baked into what you do that equity is just the regular day-by-day business as usual. You don't even have to think about it because it's just so normal. We're not quite there yet. So until we get there, it might take having a special dedicated group of people, a dedicated team within your church to kind of make sure it's starting to happen, to kind of get it into those places until we work our way to a point where we don't need the special team anymore. But what that can mean also, and what we really want to talk about today is kind of some of the pitfalls of that. How do you make sure that the people who are not on the special team are also being brought along on all the work that's being done? And what are some of the approaches that you can use for that? So this is our challenge. And I just kind of wanted to think about a spectrum of how you bring people in and what it can look like. You know, what is being informed versus being engaged versus being on the journey. And so maybe if we think about a vacation as an example, right? So a friend or a family member has taken this wonderful vacation. They come back, they tell you all about it. They show you all the pictures. You are so excited about it. You love hearing all the stories and you know everything that they did. But at the end of the day, you just kind of know, right? You weren't there, you didn't feel it. You can be happy for them because you love them and you're glad they had a good time. But this didn't have any long-lasting impact. When you walk away from that conversation, you're not necessarily going to be thinking about this day and night, this trip, and how it impacted you and how it changed you. Just had a great story, a great lunch with a friend, caught up on all the details, and moved on with your life. A lot of times when we're doing this kind of work and when we have our special teams and committees, we kind of get stuck in that informing stage. The committee does the work, the 2 or 3 people or the department that's in charge of it, they're really excited, they're really moved, they're really changed by the work that they're doing. And when they do it, they come to a staff meeting each week or each month, or they send out a newsletter each quarter, and they tell everybody else everything that's going on. So they hear the story and they say, oh, that's great. You know, I'm proud of my church. We're doing that. We have that committee that's doing that work. And then they go on about their business because it wasn't really theirs. They were informed, but they weren't part of it. So that's really what we want to avoid. We've got that in red. We want it from the beginning. We want to start thinking about how do we bring your congregations on this IDOT process with you that's not just informing them. So the next level we have engaged, right? So this is where, let's take our vacation again. Maybe the vacation is for your parents and their wedding anniversary. So you and your siblings, you were all part of planning it. You picked out the hotel, you looked at the locations they were going to, you picked out the restaurants, and then you got all the tickets and sent your parents on their way. So you were much more involved with that, right? So you have a little bit closer of a tie to it because you actually picked out some things, you're excited, you hope that they like the hotel you chose, you hope they like the little soaps on the pillow, all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, you still didn't go on the trip yourself. So you're a little bit more connected, but you're not quite there. And whatever, wonderful emotional experience that they had on the trip that's going to continue to stay with them, that might change how they look at things. Maybe they met a wonderful Parisian chef and now they only cook French food, or they met some other culture and they think about, but something happened on that trip that might continue to impact them. So as much as you were engaged in the planning and the process, you still didn't have that transformative experience. You will never have it because it still wasn't something you were in. So we want to get to the part where the congregation is actually on the journey with you. We want to think about how do we take the things that we're doing during this IDAP process and start to weave it into the fabric of your church as it already exists, so that it's natural to weave it in, so that you're not just reporting out on Sunday mornings about what the monthly meeting was at IDAT, and so that we're not just kind of getting a little bit input here and there, but not mentioning IDAT very often. So the members are hearing about it occasionally, but they're not really involved. What does it look like for the full congregation to be on this journey with you? So here's some starter ideas, and then you all we're gonna kind of talk about this out loud, and then we'll put you in your groups with your actual churches to start thinking about the way you all are set up and the things you are doing. Indeed and Truth, we know now that's the name of this program, IDAT, Indeed and Truth. We have deed circled here in red. So we really want to focus on this. What does doing this work look like indeed in your church? And I have here just a couple of examples from my own faith practices of what I could think of that happens in the churches that I participate in. And so your list might look different, but I was thinking, what are the places, what is already happening, and what might it look like to have an active deed around this work in these different spaces in the church? You have a weekly service. Is there a place, from the pulpit where this can be talked about? You all have a monthly meeting to bring this in, to bring in a lesson or a reflection that's kind of part of the service. In Sunday school, is there a way to tie some of these things in? Bible study, prayer service? Can the issues and topics that we're talking about, if you have a prayer service, be officially added to the list of things that you're praying about as a group, praying about aloud? So it's just woven into that prayer service as a natural thing that you all would be thinking about and contemplating and finding to be important enough to come together on. Special ministry meetings. Many churches have, a youth ministry, a couples ministry, a community ministry, all of the different ways that your members come together and meet and take time out of their lives to fellowship and to think about the things that are important. Where are the spaces in here that would be natural to make sure you're mentioning? We are also on this IDAT journey. And we are also thinking about these other issues related to our church. We're thinking about racism. We're thinking about equity. We're thinking about transformation. How do we work it naturally into these conversations? And even day-to-day administration. Some are there, and this will be, something we dig into, but do we have some documents that have some language that we might want to revisit that we haven't looked at in so long we don't even notice that? And it's, do we have emblems or imagery that we use in our letterhead, or that we have, around the building? Is there something in the stained glass window that we haven't even looked at in so long, or we're so used to being there, we might not even remember what it symbolizes? And it turns out that as we're digging, it might be something we might not want to have up there anymore as a representative of our church, and how we look at things. So these were just some examples that I thought of. Could some of you all maybe share some spaces or activities that you have as a regular part of your church right now, where there might be opportunity to think about how to start to slowly add these things into the conversation?
I'll say Wiltshire has lunch and learns, things like that, different learning opportunities where we could start working this in.
I love that idea. I love that. And it's great because it sounds like your congregation is already used to having that as an activity.
To me, it's really important that we not be so narrow in how we define what we're working on racism and equity. I live in a community that's 42% Latino. They have no political power in this community whatsoever. We have 13% are African Black people. Half of them are descendants of the people who were enslaved. The other half have come here from Africa or other cities, other places. We have 10% Asian. To me, when I think about justice and equity, it's finding a place at the table for everyone, that everyone is welcome. And I want to just hope we don't so focus on one element that we exclude the others. We just did a big program here in Garland back in April, and my wife was actually in charge of it. And one of the points that was made at that community gathering, we had 500, 600 people there, was a lot of the participants were the children or the great-grandchildren who were descendants of enslaved people. But half the people on the program were from Africa. And we needed to recognize how diverse our Black community is. I just have a real burden for I'm a person, I'm Native American, identify with the Chickasaw tribe. I'm very involved. I just see racism everywhere. And it's not just against one particular group. Exclusions. I could just go preach on and on.
No, I love what you're sharing.
It's something that we work on in our community. My wife and I formed an organization here that's one of our goals, was to recognize all people. And that really is what we talk about all, and we uppercase A-L, all people. You probably hit
Thank
what you wanted to out of me on that subject.
No, I'm glad. I'm glad. I appreciate it. Um, I think you bring up some very valid points, and I think it's really what I love about this is it brings us to thinking about what we're focusing on here is very specifically um, what is the transformation you and your church are looking for? Because that's going to look very different. Um, and that's one of the things we kind of started you to thinking about in your reflections. And we want to ask you as committees to continue thinking about. And maybe these are questions you can pose in different moments to have other congregation members think about. But what does success look like? What would make you feel like you've taken a positive step? Success doesn't have to look like you have equal membership numbers across all races that have ever existed in the world, right? If your community or if your church is located in a city where the population of the city is 97% white, then we're not aiming for success to mean that you have a membership that looks like the rainbow. Where are these people going to come from, right? So that just doesn't have to be what it means. And I think a lot of times there are a couple of common ways that really kind of show maybe diversity or show inclusion in such a visible way that they become maybe an expectation or a default thought when we think about what it should look like. But we know that that might not always be the case. And so I think thinking about for your church, what that means, how you define it. You know, the first step might even be, we're not even sure how to go about defining it. And we want to think about that a little bit more. Do we, do we want to change in our membership? Do we have actual physical, things on the walls that we want to take down? Do we have a reputation in the community that we would like to be different? Maybe there's not a big hostile history that you have to deal with, but maybe you're just not as involved with all in the community as you'd like to be. And so you might just be thinking about, you know what, we do have a diverse community here in our city, but why when we put out our job applications or advertise for an event, we don't necessarily get a diverse response if that's what your success looks like. And it's also fair to think about the fact that there are certain moments and practices and engagements where people might culturally want to be with people who share a similar background. And there's nothing wrong with that either. So I think that's the biggest thing that we kind of want to start thinking about is for your church, for your situation right now, today in 2024, what do you and your fellow committee members right now want to think about as what success could look like for you at the end of this particular program? Even if it's just a first step or a second step. And then we can work with you around that. And I think it's important, especially thinking about the congregations of the 6 churches. There are 6 churches represented in this cohort. 4 of you on the initial application where you shared information about the church selected more than 250 as the church size. And the other 2 selected 51 to 150. So you all have very large congregations. When we're talking about trying to engage people and trying to bring along on the journey, it's much harder to do that with 150 to 250 people and more than if you're a small county church with 50 folks, right? So we know that there are just going to be unique challenges that kind of come from where you are. And I like calling that out because those challenges can present barriers that might make it start to feel like failure as you're working on something, make it feel like you're not going anywhere. And we just really want to open the space and the floor up to recognize that it is not failure, it's just different. And everybody's not going to be measured by the same bar. And it's nobody else's business, really, what church your bar has, or bar your church has set for itself, as long as it's kind of fitting what you're wanting to see. Now, there's always going to be room for learning. We might set some initial goals and learn a little bit more and realize that our goals are actually not going to take us to where we want to be because we want to be transformed. And that's the growing process. But that's kind of one of the things that we want you to take away. So tonight, there's some concrete things we want you to walk away with. And we're about to kind of go into groups so you can start thinking about it. But we want you to be able to walk away with some 2 clear ideas of something you can do this next month before the September meeting about how you can talk about tonight and the fact that the church is in this cohort with the rest of the church. And we want to think of what are 2 ideas beyond the informed stage. We don't just want to report it out at the Sunday service, right? We you can report it out. There's nothing wrong with adding it to the bulletin, but what does it look like if we go a step further? How do we at least move into the yellow with talking about tonight's orientation session, explaining to the congregation that the church is a member of this cohort and that you want to bring them along, right? And if you can start to think about edging into that green, that would be great. But if we're not ready for green yet, we can start working on the yellow right now. So I'd like to, and if there's any questions about it, we can talk about it, but I'd like to have a few minutes for you all to go into your groups, in your church groups, and start thinking with each other, what are 2 ways that you all can go back over these next 30 days before our September meeting and share with the congregation in a way that's more in the engaged and the on the journey categories about what IDAT is, what the church is involved in, and kind of get them used to the fact that this is going on and they'll be hearing about it. Okay. Any thoughts or questions before we send you into groups? All right, we're going to send you in probably for about 5 to 7 minutes, and we'll pull you out to share the ideas that you've come up with.
It's going to take us just a second. We had a little bit of
interesting conversations. We know this is kind of your first thought process, so we don't expect everybody to have a full action plan and 3 to 5 year strategic plan in place quite yet. But we would love to be able to go around and hear from each church, maybe some of the ideas that you have. And some of your thoughts and your ideas might inspire others, especially if they might have some similar activities or a similar format to you. So is there a group that feels comfortable going first and sharing their thoughts? Okay. I saw Kathleen first.
I want to go first because I think I was in the same position as Mary, where I was like spitting one last idea out before we got shot back to so I'm like, before I forget it. So we talked about a lot of things. Rowan mentioned our church is pretty great at doing book investigations. So we talked about doing a book investigation of a specific book about the Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court case that all went down in New Orleans. And I think that I think that our church plays a role in that book. So we're like, ooh, dig and see where is St. Charles in that book. We also talked about, we have Wednesday night dinners. We talked about announcing it then, but I think a multi-pronged approach, also taking a moment to announce it from the pulpit. And I think early on, so people like in terms of like, hey, y'all, we're going on this journey. We're at the beginning. Come as you can, join us as you can. And one great thing that Becky brought up also was who we hire. We've got a lot of building contract work to be done, and looking at hiring Black contractors and BIPOC contractors to do some of the work that needs to be done on the actual facility. So all over the place.
Oh, I love it. I'm taking notes as you spew out your wonderful ideas. Who is next? I saw a bunch of hands jump up at the beginning. So Juliana, lovely hand.
Yes, lovely. Well, Shelby had mentioned our lunch and learns, which are already scheduled for the first and third Wednesday of every month. So we could definitely incorporate that. Somebody in the text chat had mentioned a newsletter. I think Wilshire would definitely need to start informing the congregation through our tapestry, our newsletter, our Sunday bulletin, because we've got to start somewhere, and that is the logical place to inform the most amount of people. And then our Sunday school classes would be a great place for us to do to start doing teaching and engaging on smaller groups in Sunday school classes, and branching out to even especially probably the youth or the children's and missions. We were talking our youth at Wilshire is probably our most diverse looking group. And that would be a fantastic group to start with, or even use to springboard from and get them engaged. And then use is not the right word, but incorporate them and their diversity to then spread to the church and encourage their engagement and that kind of stuff. What else did we say, friends? Lunch and learns and the youth and Sunday school and
I'm gonna pop in. One thing I learned that came out of our conversation was each week during worship, during our prayers of the people.
The prayers of the people.
Yeah, which is just a great way, once our congregation is aware of what we're doing, is to weave this work into the prayers of the people, at least monthly, maybe weekly, so that this work is bigger than us, and the congregation is able to join us in prayer for this work. I love that idea.
That's excellent. And I love a big piece. I just want to highlight a lot of what you all shared from your ideas were around education and thinking about Sunday school and introducing topics, and even with the book club that was mentioned before is introducing topics. So everything doesn't have to be, when you're doing this, walking into the room saying, we have to fight for justice. Did you see what happened on the news last night? Sometimes, depending on where you are, it might just be getting used to talking about things you haven't talked about before. So if you have a book club, reading a book you don't necessarily usually read to educate a little bit more. If you have plays throughout the year, you broaden your base of where you choose your play from? Maybe a play or a script that's a little bit different than what you usually use, added into the 6 other plays you're going to do this year, right? So I love that, a way of thinking about that. If it's Sunday school and you do readings or teachings or tell stories, is there a story or a teaching that you haven't done before, or you haven't brought in a particular perspective? And you can just add that story into the 100 other stories you'll be teaching in Sunday school over the course of the next couple of months. So you don't have to feel like you have to walk in right away and just change everything and flip it upside down on its head and make everybody mad and uncomfortable. There are certainly times when people might need to feel uncomfortable at different moments, depending on what you're trying to do, but you might not be there yet, right? We're just we're thinking about this is a journey. And it's, we're specifically talking about what you want for your church. I want to keep bringing that back because that is a different goal than the goal of ending racism. This group is not about the goal of ending racism, right? This group is not about nationwide peace. We are specifically talking about, what do you and your churches and your congregations need to feel like you're moving in the direction you want to move, and that you're recognizing, reckoning with, overcoming, and changing anything historically that you don't want to be associated with the future of the church. Okay. So I want to keep bringing that up, because anytime we talk about this, it's very easy to start feeling like we have to be responsible for all the ills of the world, and you don't. Now, every second Tuesday night for the next year or so, when we're hanging out together, we're only talking about, what do your churches need to heal, to move forward, and to be part of progress for your communities. So thank you all for sharing those. That's fantastic. Who else is ready to share?
So First Christian Montgomery, although it's been around since the very early 20th century, like 1908 or something like that, almost none of the people in our congregation are part of families that were around that started the church. In fact, most of the people in our congregation have only been around since the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. I mean, there's a lot of turnover in our congregation, and it's not a historic families congregation, which is cool, which means that a lot of the people in our church don't know the history of our church. And so I think part of what we want for our congregation is to know more about the history of our congregation. We had 100th anniversary, some 15 years ago or something. And like at probably 50 to 60% of the church is different now than it was then, if not more. And so we want to like ask the people of our congregation, tell us what you want to know about the history of your church. Recognize that in Montgomery, a lot of things have happened. You know, the bus boycotts, Governor Wallace, the racist 1901 Constitution of Alabama, and see if we can sort of tell the story of our church in relationship to some of those sort of big events. And see, learn about like how we impacted them, were impacted by them, were complicit in them, all that. We thought that'd be a good way to introduce people both to their church history better and the work of this work better. And then someone was like, well, we should ask them not just for what questions they have about their church, but like what memories do they have about their church for the people who've been around longer that they want to share. So that we can, sort of crowdsource and have a kind of people's history perspective on who we are as a church. So that was one of the things that we were thinking about.
I love that. And you actually segued right into another piece. We won't dive deep into it tonight, but just to let you all know what's coming, another part of bringing people along on the journey is understanding what the people need and what they want to do and what's necessary and important to them. And so later on in this process, we'll be working with you to do a congregational survey. And so that you can think about and find out, where is your congregation currently on some of these topics? Where are they with their interests, with their concerns and fears, with their positive thoughts, their negative thoughts, their own experience around this, and what would they need or do they need from you, or how they feel about everything. This is something we do quite often with groups that we work with, but this will be a little bit different in this setting. So we won't dive too deep into that now, but I'm glad you brought that up, because in the next session, what we'll talk about is having you all start to ponder as a group, what would be the things you would want to know or learn from your congregation that would be useful and helpful for you as you decide how to incorporate this work into the fabric of your church, what questions you would want to ask. And then as we do and build that survey, there will be some core questions that everyone will have on their survey, but then we'll also have some personalized questions that are specific to the church that come from you all and your knowledge of what might need to be asked for your particular community and congregation. So I love that you brought that up, Shane. Thank you. It's a perfect piece there. And who else would like to share your ideas? Hey, Kathy.
For Fulham Church, we, with some regularity, have in worship, it's usually 4 or 5 minutes on a particular topic of that the congregation needs to know about. So someone will get up and explain it, tell about it, invite people to participate, whatever the issue is. So for us, probably the best way to start is to do a focus in worship. This group is sort of an adjunct to our anti-racism committee. And the idea of looking back at our history, we think we probably sit on a plantation, where a plantation used to be, that held slaves, enslaved people. And so and I think there'd be a lot of interest in our church in looking back at that history that we don't really know well. That's one thing. We also have, like other churches, Wednesday night dinners and programs, and Shalice oversees those programs. So trying to weave some of this into that schedule is also something that would be an effective way to hopefully get people excited about the work.
Excellent. Excellent. And then I feel like we may have missed, did we get every church? I feel like we may have missed one. Tom, sorry about that.
No worries. Well, we talked about a number of things. We talked about, one of the things that we talked about was that rather than having things that we may need to take down, what do we want to put up to give evidence to this? And one of the things that we talked about, we have down kind of a main hallway, we have very intentionally put some large pictures that show the life of the congregation, and wanting to think about how we might do that. I forgot who was mentioning, I think it was Shane was talking about the age of his congregation, and reminded me that 2027 will be our 75th anniversary as a congregation. I've kind of thought about that some and what might we do. And so I think we may try and incorporate some of this with that. In the short term, Lynn's going to write a piece that can be a part of our newsletter to introduce this whole journey. And in September, we do a joint worship service. Normally we have more than one worship service. So we'll come together for one worship service and usually have a ministry fair in September. And so we'll have a booth to introduce this and share that it is happening.
Love that. Absolutely love that. And there's something, I feel like there's another meaning, another layer there with talking about it at a joint session where you're already kind of coming together and making sure that you're creating a moment where groups that usually worship separately are coming together and kind of using that power to put towards this work as well. So I love that. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing and for thinking. I hope you found that to be a helpful discussion. What we really want to do to be able to take away from today is feeling like you have a couple of concrete ideas that you can work on and continue to think about for how to incorporate this. And here's what we would kind of encourage you to work toward before our next meeting is taking at least one of the ideas you came up with tonight, because we know you can't do everything at once necessarily, but at least one, and trying to execute it in some form before the next meeting. Even if it's very small, even if it's just getting that article written, getting that announcement in the newsletter, having that discussion, but doing a step, before you come back in September, we want all of your congregations to know that you're involved in this. And even if you feel like you're stuck on the informed stage, that's okay. We got to do the informed stage. We're going to continue to push towards the engaged and the on the journey stages. But the first thing we want to do is always take a step, right? The second thing we want to encourage you to do over this next month is amongst yourselves, and even you might start conversations with other congregation members, but think about what does success look like for our church? And you can be, this might be something you ponder on specific individually and thinking about the specific ministries you're involved in. And then you might also kind of come together as a group. But we want you thinking about that success so that as we're working through this, we can start working with you on it as well, as we bring in mentors and as we're able to provide specific technical assistance and guidance. We can help you with shaping those ideas of what you're wanting to achieve. And if it's hard and you can't figure that out, let us know that too, and we'll start talking through and thinking about how you set some goals and what that might look like. And then I will turn it over to Caroline for a last moment or two. There we go.
Yeah, thank you all for the richness of those ideas and the richness of this time together. Another component and where the title for Indeed and Truth came from, 1 John 3:18. So spend some time with self in your prayer closet, with each other about this particular scripture and what it means to you. Little children, let us not love with word or with tongue, but in deed and truth. And so that's a piece of it, and that's a reflection going forward as well. There's the reflection guide that's gone out for you to spend some time with, and I know most of you have really engaged with that. Look for an email from us in the next 24 to 48 hours that will have this information in it. As Shauna said, reach out with any questions that you might have going forward, and let tonight percolate. Who did you connect with? What was an aha? What was a revelation within your team and within the group? And the movement forward is I can feel the expansion already through the conversation that you all have shared with us. The next gathering, we normally meet on Tuesday, the first Tuesday of the month. That would be the Tuesday after Labor Day. So you'll get a calendar invite. It'll be changed this evening. It will be September 10th is when we will meet again, 6 to 8 Central Standard Time, 7 to 9 Eastern Standard Time. We will have Reverend Dr. Joey and Reverend Dr. Jay talking about the scripture and the Bible context for reconciliation, this idea of purple church, which actually Jay is the person who lifted that up for me. And so they're going to be guiding the session next time in the learning components. Reach out, cell phone text, cell phone calls, email. We're here and happy to be with you and answer questions or provide the resources that will make this an easeful and expansive, joyful journey. And
Thank
I
you all.
wonder
Mhm.
if Pastor Tom might close us out with a word, a prayer.
Oh, I'd be honored. Let's pray. For this day, for the signs of your grace that surround us, and for a journey in truth, we give you thanks. Send us forth from this time that we might rest in your grace and rise to your work. In Jesus' name, amen.
Peace and blessings, everybody. Have a great night and a wonderful week.